Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review. I'm here today to talk to you about Red Riding Hood, the 2011 movie. Boy, it's been that long, nearly a decade ago. I've always wanted to see this movie. I remember when it came out and I saw Amanda Seyfried, I think her name is. I've always wanted to see it because I was a huge fan of hers in Mean Girls. I love Mean Girls. And when it comes to the trio of the Mean Girls, well, actually, the foursome, I guess you could say, only two of their careers like exploded, and Amanda's was one of them. And so since then, she has been in a number of high profile movies. However, they have not all been good. Some of them flopped, some of them bombed, and some was actually pretty good. And so when she started off in the movies, like a lot of people praised her performance in this movie. I thought it was just okay, like just all right. Some of her dialogue could have been stronger. She could have gave more feeling to it, you know what I'm saying? But for the most part, it's just okay. Not as good as Mean Girls. It just seemed she didn't sound old school, like 1700s to me, you know what I'm saying? And so like I've always wanted to see this movie and I always wonder how it did. Leonardo DiCaprio, he produced it and stuff like that. But then I remember, and I never read anything about the movie, but I read about how it didn't do so well. It got negative reviews and this and that. And so after watching it, I can see why it got negative reviews. You know what I'm saying? It's not terrible, but it's not amazing or perfect. Basically, this movie came out when so many people was into YA novels. They were trying to be the new Twilight. And so Red Riding Hood took the old classic Brothers Grimm story and tried to make it into this kind of like teen romance, gothic kind of YA type story. Basically, they were just trying to make Twilight. And I like that idea. Like, it's fun to take old school fairy tales and reimagine them. Sometimes it can work out very well. I mean, even in comics, look at the Joker movie. The Joker is the way he is in the comic, and they decided to make a realistic mental illness type version of him. So things like that can work. And I'm always for darker takes on classic stuff. Even though Red Riding Hood was kind of dark in itself. You have the wolf, it dresses up as the grandmother, it tries to eat Little Red. And so while the premise is interesting, the plot of the movie is not strong enough. I never felt scared in this movie. Not even at the end when the werewolf was revealed. I just never felt scared. Also, a lot of the characters are underdeveloped, especially the main one of Red Riding Hood herself, who has been renamed Valerie. And so, for the most part, Valerie is shown all throughout the movie and she's doing stuff, but we really don't know much of nothing about her. We don't know what her temperament is like. We don't know really nothing about her. And it's quite a shame because she is our main protagonist and you're supposed to know about her. Also, when it comes to her two love interests of Henry and Peter, we don't know much about them either. And we don't know much about nobody. We don't know much about her parents. Nobody in this movie. So it's kind of like we just have a bunch of characters, but we don't know, well, who they are, other than little tidbits that they give us. We know that I don't know which. I think Peter. Peter is the one who dresses goth and has like the black hair and always staring her down. They was friends in the past, but that's about all we know. Then there's Henry. He comes from a good family. He's a blacksmith and he's been betrothed to like marry her, but she doesn't want to. She has like two female friends, and that's basically it. And so, like, we know there's a werewolf in the movie and they want to hunt it down. Now, they went with the Twilight type werewolf and also the Shadow Hunter type werewolf, where it's just a giant black wolf. And so this is very common in these YA novels when a werewolf is just a giant wolf. It has a different appeal to it, it has a different vibe to it. But it doesn't really scream werewolf to me. This would have been a whole lot more interesting instead of it's not even really so much a romance movie, to tell you the truth. It kind of is and kind of, I would have loved this as more of a horror action movie. That would have been great. Like mostly the horror, like that's what you want to see. If they would have made this into a straight up horror movie, this would have been rock and roll. Especially with the red cloak and everything. She's the only one who like wears it. But the cloak is kind of rinky dink. It's not made of silk, it's just made out of regular cotton. On Once Upon a Time, the television show, now that was a cool red cloak. It was made of silk. And so, because the cloak has to be a character on its own, it has to have a personality. It needs to be made of silk, but it's not. And so, because like it's just so uninteresting, like it's not terrible, like I said, it's just a little uninteresting, and so because of that it just didn't do well. Now this movie has a huge star-studded cast. That has always been a problem I have noticed in movies. Whenever there's a movie's a star-studded cast, they always bomb. This movie has Virginia Madison, Billy Burke, Amanda Seyfried, or whatever her name is, what's her name? Casey, forget her last name. Casey something from The Haunting Hour and Hannibal. Like I recognize a lot of people in this, and Gary Oldman and stuff. Raw, that's it, Casey Raw. And so like it has a lot of famous people. Now, diversity rise, there is no diversity. It's mainly just white. And I'm actually okay with it this time. I know I'm all about diversity, but when it comes to these period pieces, well, what race are you really expect to see? You know what I'm saying? But it is cool when they do add like people of color to some old school, like, period pieces. However, they did add some people of color, but these people of color are only servants. They're guards for Father. What's father's last name? Father something. Solomon, that's it. Father Solomon. They're his like guards that he uses to kill werewolves and stuff. And there's two black guys, there's an Asian guy, and there's some white looking dude. I'm just like, really? The only people of color are the people who are basically servants? I can't hate when they do that. And so basically these town people, they have been plagued by a werewolf. So they go hunting and they kill an actual wolf, not the werewolf. And Father Solomon tells them when you kill a werewolf, they revert back to their human form. So that can't be one. But these people don't want to listen. They're like, but we're just going to celebrate anyway because we killed the werewolf. Well, ha 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 ha, like he tried to tell you and warn you, but you didn't want to listen. So basically he's trying to prepare these people for the werewolf. He encloses the town and he tries to get all the people in one building and stuff. And so like, they don't want to listen. Now we get to some new rules with the werewolf. So that's kind of cool. They didn't want to go old school. Basically with this werewolf, there are two types of full moon: a regular white full moon and a blood full moon. If it's a white full moon and the wolf bites you, you die. But if it's the blood moon, then you turn into a werewolf, and of course silver kills it. We also learn later on in this movie through visuals that it cannot enter holy ground. If it attempts to enter holy ground, it burns its skin. I like that. That kind of reminds me of Highlander a little bit. So I like these new rules and everything. So that's a nice setup. And so they get attacked by the werewolf and Henry Father dies and stuff. Now, who is the werewolf? Is it a good build-up? No. See, they make you think two people might be the werewolf. One is Peter, just because he looks like he came out of a Twilight movie. And he's dressed all in black and he has that vibe to him. So you assume he's the werewolf, especially how he always stares at people. Then the second person is grandmother, who gives Valerie that of the red cloak. And the grandmother is very weird, very mysterious and stuff. She's always giving weird stares. And so, because she's the grandmother and the wolf dressed up as the grandmother back in like the old school fairy tale, you assume it's her. So they keep building this up between these two. So you think, okay, it's gonna be one of those two. But then all of a sudden, the grandmother questions Henry, thinking he's the werewolf. And then one time, um, Peter is locked in like this kind of like prison type thing, and then the werewolf appears, and then when they go to like the little prison thing, somebody busted the door open, making you think it's him. Well, one interesting twist with this is when the werewolf started attacking, it communicated telepathically, not telepathically, but it communicated with that of Valerie. Now she had her friend next to her. Her friend only heard growling, but Valerie understood the werewolf. For whatever reason, the werewolf wants to take her out of town. But why? Now the werewolf attacked her mom and scratched her on the face, but she didn't turn because she wasn't bit. And so one of the guards' brother gets bit and Solomon kills him, pissing off the brother. And so the guards are mean to people in town and they treat people like crap. So basically there's a boy who's mentally ill and they assume he's the werewolf and they try to like hang him or some crap like that. They imprison him, which pisses off the friend of Valerie. So she's trying to get him back. She's gonna do favors to get him back. But Father Solomon don't want her. But then she's all like, I can give you a witch instead. And he's all like, who? And I'll release your brother. So she tells him that Valerie talked to the wolf. But see, the friend don't know what the wolf said. And we don't know why the wolf is able to communicate with Valerie. It's never explained to the end of the movie. And so, like, of course, he betrays both of them. He still keeps the boy, but then he imprisons Valerie and he's going to use her as bait. He puts like a metal mask on her face in the shape of a wolf, and he ties her and chains her down in the middle of the square where he's using her for like werewolf bait. At this point in time, before that, her and Peter banged and everything. Henry saw, he's pissed, but he's like, whatever, you can have him. So Peter and Henry are gonna try to bust, like, you know, what's the name, out of her shackles. But Peter is taken captive. And so Henry has to do the rescuing and everything. And so after she's rescued and everything, she is starting to she's trying to figure out who the wolf is. The wolf said he wants to take her away. Henry wants to take her away, so she thinks it's him. She starts thinking it's grandmother and everything. She's starting to just randomly suspect people. I guess she's starting to remember stuff and everything. And so at some point, what's his face get bit? Solomon. And his arm gets like ripped off, right? Now Solomon has silver fingernails because he wants to like kill the werewolf. He's a werewolf hunter. So of course the guard kills him because he's like, blood moon and revenge for my brother. And so like at this point, she has a bizarre dream. And in this dream, they try to implement stuff from the fairy tale. So when she's asleep and she wakes up and she sees her grandmother looking at her, she's like, grandmother, what big eyes you have. Grandmother, what big teeth you have. Grandmother, about like, I'm just kind of like, I don't know if this is stupid or genius because it's a dream sequence and everything. So I'm okay with this because it's a dream sequence and everything. Because it's kind of like, she's just kind of like, wow, because she suspects her grandma to begin with. So it's kind of like, you know, having these big eyes and whatnot. And so it's kind of like, I can deal with that, right? I can deal with that. So anyway, after having this dream, she is now worried, thinking something's going to happen to her grandmother. But why? Why does she think that? So she runs to grandmother's house. And so then we get more crap from the fairy tale, which is now is stupid. So before she gets to grandmother's house, she stabs Peter because she thinks Peter is the werewolf and everything. Well, she can't kill him if she don't have a silver knife, so that's kind of stupid. She just has a rinky-dink knife. So she goes to grandmother's house, and grandmother is changing. And there's a sheet in front of her, so she's behind like a veil. She's like, "Go eat some soup. I made some soup." So she pours herself some soup. But when I look at it, I'm like, it don't look like soup. It looks like red, brownish mush and everything, almost like meat. So she eats it, and she's like, "What the heck kind of soup is this?" And then they do the stupidest thing in the world. We hear grandmother talking, but the grandmother isn't grandmother, it's the werewolf. So they did the whole thing like in the fairy tale where the wolf pretends to be the grandmother. This makes absolutely no sense. And it's the stupidest thing I ever heard. And it mimics her voice perfectly. And who is the werewolf? Her dad. What the heck? There was no build up to that whatsoever. So it defeats the purpose of making the audience think it's either Peter or the grandmother. It would have paid off big time if it was the grandmother. That would have been a great twist. Okay, it would have fit in line somewhat with the fairy tale. Oh, also the three little pigs show up. There are three guys with a pig mask just running around when they were partying. So that's a little reference to that. But if they would have made Peter the werewolf, then it would have been more like a Twilight thing. And that's just kind of like blah, blah. Wait, though. So anyways, the father had no build up to being that of the werewolf whatsoever. And so it just falls flat because he's mostly just a drunk and we barely see him in the movie. So that just took the fun out of it. And then we get a huge explanation. He explains everything. So we find out now why she's able to communicate with him as a wolf, because she is his daughter. Now, she had an older sister. The older sister was killed by a wolf. Turns out he thought the older sister was his too, but when he couldn't communicate with her in wolf form, he knew she wasn't his and his wife had an affair. Enraged, he kills the older sister, and then he slashes the mother's face and everything. And so I think Valerie was able to figure that part out. And so he killed her lover, which was Henry's father. See, Henry, when he went to his dead father, he could smell the wolf. And so that's why he assumed the grandmother was the wolf, because he could smell it on her. But it was just, what's his name, and the wind was blowing on him. So then there's more explanation. His father was a wolf. He went looking for his father and everything. And that's why he wants his daughter. He just wants his daughter to live out as like werewolves, and he wants to bite her. And so I'm just like, dude, you literally explained everything. They also showed a little bit of flashback, a little bit, but still he had to explain everything instead of letting us see it throughout the movie. So the build-up just isn't all that suspenseful and everything, right? And then all of a sudden, here comes Peter, who's alive after getting stabbed in the stomach. And he fights the dad. But he fights the dad in human form. Doesn't even fight the dad in werewolf form. Then all of a sudden, she does something to trick him, and he gets stabbed in the back with an axe. And then she stabs him in the stomach with the severed hand with the silver fingernails. So now her dad is dead. But Peter has been bit. So he's all like, I must leave from here because I'll put you in danger and blah, 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 blah. So now he is now the werewolf. And I'm just like, really? Really? So now they have to cut open the stomach of the dad, put rocks in there, and take him out to sea, because nobody can know that she is the daughter of a werewolf, because people will come after her. And in a weird montage, they do that. And then Peter leaves her, and he's like, I'll come back for you one day. And so years pass by. Henry is now a soldier with those other werewolf hunters. The mom lives by herself. Valerie lives in her grandmother's house because she just wants to be by herself. And at some point, Peter comes back. She has a hallucination of them walking in the snow. And now her red cloak is like 20 feet long in the hallucination. Then it's back to like the modern day, and they live out their lives as werewolf and girlfriend. And that is so lame. So I see why this bombed at the box office. You know, it's like, they had an intriguing premise. They had a new nuance to it. They just dropped the ball on so many different levels that it wasn't catchy enough like the Twilight movies or Harry Potter or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And it's quite a shame because this could have been really, really cool if they would have made it both romantic, goth, and gruesome. You know what I'm saying? They should have made it into a horror movie because this had like such a beautiful look to it, and it could have been something great, but they dropped the ball. And Leonardo DiCaprio should have did harder to make it into like a smash hit. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.